Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto unleashed his powers in Star Wars? Part 1. Huge shout out to fan reader 26 for this story. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. Ow. Okay, not my best landing. Better get into contact with Master Anakin or Obi-Wan. Jumping out of her GD Starfighter, Delta 7, she looked around to see that she was in a dense forest that seemed to be void of anything living. Though she chalked that up to her crash landing. Turning to the droid that was her onboard companion, she asked. R2, can you establish a link to my comm with the onboard communications array? Whistle beep whistle. Bringing her comm to her mouth, she began to speak. Master Anakin, Master Obi-Wan, can either of you hear me? Static Ahsoka. Circa. Static. Oh great, the array must be down. Looking back to the droid, she asked R2, can you see what you can do with the communications? Getting an affirmative beep, she watched the droid begin to tamper with some wires and circuits on the ship. Once she saw him finish up, she tried her comms again. Can you hear me now? Ahsoka. Good to hear from you. Well, without the static. This is no time for your wit, Anakin. We have no idea where she is or if she is injured. Smiling at the obvious professional concern, she reassured the man, I'm fine, Master Obi-Wan, though I can't say the same for my ship. She looked to the GD Starfighter only to wince when the only remaining landing gear broke, causing the ship to fully lay on the ground. When we brought you along on this excavation trip, I assumed that you would not take any unnecessary risks. Why on earth would you engage a separatist ship on your own? I wasn't really trying to engage it. It just came out of nowhere and shot at me. Hey, cut her some slack. She did fine for her first time out on her own. Heck, I was younger than her when I fought a group of separatists. You weren't even meant to leave that hangar. But I digress. Ahsoka, can you activate your emergency SOS beacon? This whole sector is uncharted and we have no idea what planet you ended up on. Next time we shouldn't jump to hyperspace until we know for sure everyone is with us. You're never going to let this go, are you? But I let the event on Tarko go. That was entirely different. I had no idea the creature would react that way. It looked so docile. Ahsoka could not help but giggle at the banter between her master and his master. She remembered her master telling her that Obi-Wan saw a small animal once on Tarko and thought it was a pet. Turned out to be a dangerous species that attacked anything that got too close. Chased the two of them for a good while until they lost it. Shaking her head, she moved to her ship. I'll be setting up the beacon right. She paused as she felt something. Ahsoka. You still there? Was Anakin's response to the sudden silence that came from his Padawan. Ahsoka, can you hear me? Hold on, master. I feel. Something. Obi-Wan came on the comm, something like. I don't know, but it feels like another force presence. I think that. She never got to continue as she turned around and yelped ah. R2 began buzzing and whirring at the side he saw. Space frigate. Ahsoka. Anakin slammed his palms on the console before he tried to raise his Padawan again. Ahsoka. Are you there? Obi-Wan stroked his beard before looking at one of the clones. Are you able to track where she is based on her previous communications? The clone shook his head as he went through his station. Unfortunately not, sir. We were able to triangulate a general area in the system to where she is, but there are several planets there that she could be on, and it would take a good amount of time before we are able to find her ship without a beacon to follow. Anakin stopped trying to raise Ahsoka and turned to the clone. What about locating R2? We should be able to find her based on his location. The clone nodded in understanding. Right away, sir. Anakin looked to Obi-Wan. This simple mission has become a little more complicated. Indeed, though I have a feeling that it might become even more complicated before the day's end. What makes you say that? Call it a hunch. Sir. We have received a distress beacon on a planet about 5 minutes away. Anakin looked at Obi-Wan as said man had a smile on his face. Alright, I want a squad ready to deploy. We don't know what that planet could have, and we don't know what trouble my Padawan has gotten into. Obi-Wan's smile grew. Oh my. It would appear that you are starting to sound like me. Don't get your hopes up. I'm just thinking of what dangers we could find on that planet. Ahsoka. This wasn't what she expected to happen when she felt something in the force. Ahsoka found herself dangling upside down as her foot was caught in a rope trap. She perked her lips as she looked down, up. At the foot that was caught. Training to be a GD and I get caught by a simple trap. She could just see her master laughing at her predicament. She placed her hands on her hip only to notice that her lightsaber wasn't there. She looked around for it and noticed that it was laying on the ground just a few feet away. She sighed before she used the force to pull it to her. Turning it on, she swiped at the rope, causing her to fall to the ground where she flipped mid-fall and landed on her feet. She turned and walked to her ship as she straightened her clothing. Whistle beep beep whistle beep. Ahsoka looked up and smiled as R2 told her that he had sent out the distress signal. Thanks, R2. Hopefully, we won't have to stay here long. She was about to jump up to sit on the wing of the fighter, but she heard something heading her way. On instinct, she jumped to the side to hide herself in a bush and wait to see what was coming. Well, there wasn't anything in the pit, so maybe the other trap caught something. Only one way to find out, boss. It's over here, right? I think. It should be next to the tree that has the funny-looking branch, right? Ahsoka saw what caused her senses to go off. It was a pair of identical boys around her age. Both were wearing a short-sleeved orange jacket with white highlights that cut off just below his ribs, and under the jacket was a simple black short-sleeved shirt. For the lower half, he wore baggy black pants that looked military, with combat-style boots that had metal plating on the bootstraps. Holding the pants up was an orange sash that had both ends dangling on his left side. Using my fox in the leaf outfit cause I think it looks better than the jumpsuit. Naruto and his clone arrived at where his rope trap should have been, but there was something that grabbed their attention more than the trap. What the hell is that? The clone was just as shocked as his original and shrugged, don't know boss. Let's go check it out. Naruto and his clone moved closer to the triangle-shaped object. Once they got close to it they began to poke and kick it to see if it would do anything. Ahsoka watched the two as they began to kick her ship. Well, they don't seem too bad. As long as they don't cause too much damage to it or to R2. R2. She realized that R2 was still on the ship. She also noticed that the droid wasn't moving. Well, apart from his eye. Honestly don't know what else to call it. Naruto moved to the blue portion of the thing and noticed that it moved slightly. What is this thing? He began to poke it in the moving eye. Kinda looks like a camera. Wonder if this thing films stuff. He began to poke the lens until. Zap. Yo. He leapt back as the thing shocked him. He landed a few feet away from the whole thing as his clone moved to stand next to him. They both pulled out a kunai as they didn't know what else this thing could do. You okay, boss? Yeah, damn thing shocked me. He shook his hand to get the tingly feeling out. Ahsoka narrowed her eyes as she saw that they now had weapons in hand. Both Naruto and his clone were on high alert now. They didn't know what the thing was and for all they knew, it could attack again. The clone then looked to the original. Hey boss, you think it's a weapon? Don't know, but the thing obviously has electricity in it, so it could be. Rustle. In an instant, Naruto threw his kunai to the side into a tree as he felt something was there. Ahsoka jumped out of the tree and landed in a stance in between the two boys and her ship. Naruto pulled out another kunai as he looked at the newcomer. What the hell? Who is this? He would have asked who she was, but what she did, labeled her as an enemy. Ahsoka pulled out her lightsaber and ignited it, holding it in a reverse grip. Okay, non-friendlies here. Naruto eyed the glowing beam in her hand, and every instinct told him not to let the thing touch him. Okay, whatever that thing is, I don't want to try my luck. Looking at his clone he gestured to her, and the clone nodded. Ahsoka saw one of the boys charging at her and prepared for the attack. She swiped low in order to incapacitate him, but he jumped over her and sent a kick at her back that sent her tumbling forward. She righted herself and turned around before she leaned to the side to avoid the blade he had in his hand. The clone tossed his kunai at her only to see her dodge it. Reaching into his weapons pouch, he pulled out a handful of shuriken and sent them flying at her. She brought her lightsaber up and sliced through the thrown blades. However, much to her shock, they didn't just drop to the ground, they poofed out of existence. What in the world? Looking at her opponent she figured it was some kind of illusion or something. But the way she felt her lightsaber cut through them felt real and not like she was cutting through air. Whatever they were fast and I get the feeling that I will regret getting hit by them. Real or not. She gripped her lightsaber as she faced the one she was fighting, while she also kept her senses on the other one. Why doesn't his brother join the fight? Shaking off the thought she decided better finish this before he joins in. She charged at her opponent and began to swipe at him, aiming for a crippling wound. The clone was dodging as best he could without touching the blade. He saw what happened to his shuriken before they poofed away. The light sword cut straight through them. Not deflect, cut through. Meaning that it was deadly. He was brought out of his thoughts when he tripped on a triad. Ahsoka took this chance to graze her lightsaber on his leg so that he wouldn't be able to fight anymore. However. Arg. Poof. To her shock, he disappeared just like the shuriken before. What the? Her eyes widened when she thought what it could be a distraction. She turned to the other boy and saw that he had not moved from where he was. But she did notice that he was rubbing the spot she had cut the other one that disappeared. Naruto felt phantom pain from the cut that his clone received. It wasn't anything that bad, but he got the gist that he would fully regret getting cut by the light sword. Okay, stay away from the bright light, got it? But I won't let her get away. Bringing his hand up for his signature jutsu, he shouted out. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Ahsoka's eyes widened as, where once was one, now there were thousands. Oh boy. Let's take her down. Right. Naruto as well as his clones charged at her with the intention of taking her out. Ahsoka got out of her shock at the shout and brought her hands up, sending a force push at the oncoming group. Unfortunately, she was only able to knock a few of them down. She had to begin swiping at the army, causing them to poof away. She would have thought them to be illusions, but she felt a few kicks and punches from them, so that thought was thrown out the window. She began trying to find the original as she figured that if she could take him down, then whatever spell he used would dispel, but with all of them looking alike and not having a chance to concentrate, she had no chance of finding him. Naruto was holding himself back as he saw that she was taking out his clones with one swipe of that sword. I need to get that thing away from her. He kept his eye open to find a chance to get it, and to his luck, he saw his chance. Ahsoka kept swiping at the horde and was starting to get tired as she had to abandon her fighting style for random strikes to take them down. This cost her as when she swiped at one clone, another kicked her arm in the air. The moment her arm stopped, she felt something grab her lightsaber from her hand and she knew that she had lost this fight. She was soon grabbed by them and her hands were brought to her back and she was forced to the ground. Grunting from the pain of hitting the ground, she tried to regain her bearings until she heard the familiar hum of her lightsaber. She opened her eyes to see the tip of the blade in her face, and as she looked up, she saw one of them holding it, which she assumed to be the original. Naruto smirked down at her. I win. Phew, no idea how to write that. Ahsoka looked up into the sky and smiled at the sight. Her master, along with Obi-Wan, had come down on a gunship with a squad of clones. Anakin looked down to see his Padawan surrounded by what he assumed to be clones using a different template, but what really got his attention was the one directly in front of her. That's Ahsoka's lightsaber. He activated his own lightsaber and jumped down. Anakin, wait. He tried to stop him but was too slow. Sighing, he looked to the squad that came with him. Provide cover fire. Yes sir. He jumped down to join the fight as the clones began firing at the army down below. Naruto looked up and could not help but gawk at the sight. A flying metal thing was coming down on them. He didn't have time to think about this when blue lights began to rain down on him and his clones. He looked around to see that his clones were being taken out by those lights, and he had to jump back over the girl and the clones holding her to avoid a barrage aimed at him. What the hell is going on here? He looked at his clones and shouted out. Scatter. The shadow clones dispersed and tried to avoid being hit by the lights, only for a lot of them to be hit and dispelled. Anakin got to Ahsoka and swiped at the ones holding her. They both let go and jumped away to avoid getting hit, giving Anakin time to get to his Padawan and pick her up. You okay? Ahsoka got to her feet and rubbed her face where a bruise began to form. I've been better. Holy crap. Both Ahsoka and Anakin looked to where the voice came from and were surprised at what they saw. Naruto was jumping around to avoid getting hit by the lights and he wasn't given a chance to even stay in one spot long enough to do anything. He dodged another round of fire by jumping off a tree and to the ground. Landing on his feet, he turned around only to see a few of them coming his way. On sheer instinct, he brought up the laser sword and blocked the blaster fire. Noticing that it was able to deflect them just by touch, he began to be defensive rather than evasive. He began to follow his instincts and move the sword here and there, deflecting the laser fire aimed at him. Holy crap. Anakin was stunned to see that this boy was able to use a lightsaber, as if he was trained to use it. He then noticed some of the deflected blaster fire was redirected at his squad and realized that he had to end this. He charged at the boy aiming to finish this fight. Naruto was stunned at the fact that he was able to stay alive for this long, since he figured that the laser fire, which he figured they were since there was a manga he read that had something like this, was just as deadly as the sword he swiped from the orange girl. Which he thought was awesome. He was brought out of his musing when he saw someone new with a blue laser sword coming at him. Oh boy. He was glad that the laser fire stopped, but he now had to block the other laser sword. He had to use all his speed to parry the oncoming assault as he really didn't want to get hit by the sword. Anakin began to strike at the boy without putting that much force into his blows. He was aiming to cripple the boy so he wouldn't get away. For the next few minutes, he fought the boy who was on the defensive. From what he could tell, the blonde wasn't parrying his strikes by skill but by instinct. Flicking his wrist a bit, he caused the boy to have his arm in the air. Anakin brought his lightsaber down and struck the boy in the arm. He struck the spot but to his surprise. Poof. Instead of the boy falling to the ground, a log took his place. Anakin looked around for where the boy could have gone. Ahsoka ran up to Anakin as she also looked around. What happened? I don't know. He just. Turned into a log. He looked at the cut log in bewilderment. Naruto was in the forest hiding from the group of people that arrived. He let out a sigh of relief as he whispered to himself, what the hell. All I wanted to do was see if I was able to catch something for lunch. But no, I find a big metal thing that zaps me, and then that weird girl comes out of nowhere with this weird laser sword. He brought up said sword as he looked it over. He began to fiddle with the handle as he was trying to find a switch for it, since it kind of gave away his position. How the hell do you turn this thing off? Before he could look at it more, he felt it being tugged away from his hand. After another strong tug, he couldn't hold onto it any longer and saw it fly away from his hand and further into the forest. He then saw it stop in the air and was confused about this until he heard. You flick the switch here. Naruto watched as the laser sword turned off before a man walked out of the shadows. Naruto now felt worried as another weird person came out of the forest. Aw, crap. Now, no need to be crude. Ashoka sighed as she made her way to the gunship that landed not that far away from the starfighter. She looked to her master and R2 who were walking by her side. Hey, don't feel bad about this. You got out of this fight alive, right? She nodded as she sat on the ship. Yeah, but I lost my lightsaber and I know for a fact that Master Obi-Wan will get on my case about it. Well, you did lose it, much like your master used to in his earlier years. Both Anakin and Ahsoka turned their head to see Obi-Wan, but what surprised them was that he was carrying the boy by the back of his jacket. Let me go. You're not taking me wherever you weirdos are going. Naruto was flailing his arms around as he tried to get out of the man's grasp. My, a feisty one, aren't you? He brought up his other hand to show Ahsoka's lightsaber. Ahsoka brought her hand up and pulled it to her. Once it was in her hand, she clipped it to her belt as she gave a hard look at the boy that she fought. Naruto was stunned at the fact that the girl was able to make the handle fly in the air into her hand. Whoa. He was then dropped to the ground and looked up to see the two older men, as well as the soldiers in white armor surrounding him. Obi-Wan crossed his arms and spoke. Well now, why don't we discuss what this is all about? As Obi-Wan said this, he could not help but feel something about the boy. Something strong. This boy is incredibly strong in the Force. Naruto didn't know how his day got to this point. Oh wait, yes he does. And then you guys dropped out of the sky and started shooting at me with those laser things. You know the rest. Naruto finished telling the new people about his encounter with the one he learned was named Ahsoka and was sitting on the ground as he was surrounded by the guys in white armor. He noticed that most of them wore the same kind of armor and it was hard to tell one from the other. It was the small tells they had that distinguished them, such as one carrying some big tube that looked like a small cannon on his back, another seemed to have a large radio, and that's not to mention the ones that have colored armor. Anakin and Obi-Wan stood over the boy as they took everything he said and thought about it. Anakin was the first to say something, so in the end. We interrupted your lunch run. Naruto was about to say something when he remembered that he still hasn't checked his trap. Oh right. He jumped to his feet and began running towards it, ignoring the people around him. He got to where the rope should be and found the rope laying on the ground and picked it up to see it was cut. Aw, man. There goes my free lunch. Anakin was amused with how the boy seemed to not really be taking the situation seriously, despite the fact that he is at the moment surrounded by soldiers. But he did notice that his apprentice, who was standing by his side, blushed and turned her head away from the boy. He looked back at the kid and noticed the rope he had. He walked up to him and asked, mind if I look at that? Naruto looked behind him to see Anakin standing a few feet away with his hand stretched out. Shrugging, he handed it to him and watched as the man looked it over. Anakin examined the clearly cut end of the rope and could see the burn on it. Thinking about the cut itself, he could easily figure out that it was done by a lightsaber. Letting a smirk to show up on his face, he looked back at the group. This has burn marks on it. Know anything about this, Ahsoka? Ahsoka chose not to answer as she felt embarrassed about the fact that her master had already figured out what had happened. Anakin chose to push his teasing, could it be that you were caught by this trap and used your lightsaber to get free? Ahsoka really wanted for her master to stop his teasing, but the snickering that she heard from the boy told her that it was already too late. She turned to glare at the boy who she saw was trying to hide his laughter. Feeling a bit of childish anger, she used the force to lift a rock and tossed it at his head. Ow. Hey. Ahsoka gained a beepy smirk but said nothing. As all this was happening, Obi-Wan kept his eyes on the boy as he couldn't help but think about the amount of power the boy seemed to have. He seems to be unaware of it. He came to this conclusion as he had seen how stunned the boy was when he pulled the lightsaber into his grasp. He stepped forward to stop what was clearly going to be an argument more on the boy's side with Ahsoka. As much as it would entertain us to watch you argue, I believe we have yet to receive your name. Naruto paused for a second before he realized that he hadn't introduced himself yet. Oh, sorry. I was kind of busy trying not to get killed by all of you. He quipped back with some dry humor. Anakin chuckled at this as he looked to his master. He's got you there. Naruto got up and jabbed a thumb at his chest. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Genin of Konoha and the most awesome ninja around. Ahsoka crossed her arms as she moved to join the older GDPP much. Naruto grinned at her. I beat you, didn't I? Ahsoka grumbled at this as she didn't have a comeback to that. Obi-Wan cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. Well, Naruto, I would like to speak with your parents about something that had come to our attention, and I assume that they would be concerned if you are not back soon. Naruto gained a sober look as he put his arms behind his head. I'm an orphan, so there is no one at home waiting for me. And before you start saying sorry to hear that or oh you poor thing, I've heard that enough from strangers outside the village, so please don't pity me for it. Anakin and Obi-Wan were surprised at his reaction. It showed a sense of maturity at his acceptance of this, and a bit of annoyance at hearing that more often than he would have liked. Naruto looked up at the position of the sun and shrugged, but I should be getting back or else grandma will be pissed. This confused them as if he was an orphan, then why does his grandma not take care of him? Ahsoka tilted her head at the statement. Wait, didn't you say you were an orphan? Why doesn't your grandma take you in then? Anakin sternly looked at his Padawan Ahsoka. Naruto however laughed at this, which caused the others to look at him funny. Once he caught his breath he spoke. She's not really my grandma. I just call her that to annoy her. Anakin chuckled at this as he looked at Ahsoka. Sounds like the same reason I call you Snips. Ahsoka rolled her eyes at this. Obi-Wan chose to move things along anyway. I would like to at least speak with you village leader about my previous statement. Naruto looked at them all and thought about whether or not it was a good idea to bring random people to the village, especially since they have a flying metal spaceship. After a minute, he shrugged his shoulders as he felt like he could trust them. Okay, but they have to stay here. He pointed to the ones wearing white armor. He may think that he could trust them, but he wasn't going to invite a potential invading force into the village. Vegeta looked back to the clones, and Obi-Wan thought about this. Bringing in armed clones would be considered a potential hostile action. He rubbed his beard before bringing up a compromise. Perhaps, only a few may join us. More for our protection than anything. Naruto squinted his eyes before shrugging. Okay, but no helmets. Despite the odd request, he saw no problem with this. Fair enough. Obi-Wan looked back at the clones and called some over. Cody, I want you and 3 of your troops to join us on this little adventure. Cody nodded. Yes sir. He gestured to 3 other clones to join them as they made their way to join the Jedi. Anakin looked at the clones as well as he gave out his order. Rex, I want you to try and gain some communications with the council, as I get the feeling that we will have to talk to them soon. Yes sir. Also, the cruiser would like to know if we need some backup. No need Rex. Once Cody and the clones joined them, Naruto crossed his arms as he looked at the one that had yellow coloring to his armor. No helmets. Cody looked to Obi-Wan as if asking if the kid was serious. You heard the man. Cody looked back at the kid before looking at his troops and nodded, getting them to take off their helmets. Naruto widened his eyes as he saw that all of them had the same face. Whoa. Didn't know you were related. One of the clones chuckled at this. You could say that, kid. We're clones. Naruto tilted his head as he walked up to him and poked him in the stomach. The clone was confused about what he was doing. What are you? He cradled his stomach as he was suddenly punched in the stomach by the kid. It wasn't the hardest he's been hit, but it sure felt close. What was that for? Naruto looked at his extended fist as he asked. I thought you said you were clones. Why didn't you disappear? Everyone was confused about this as they were not sure what he meant by this. Road to Konoha. Naruto was leading the small group toward Konoha with Obi-Wan, examining a shadow clone that Naruto made when they asked him about had he meant when he asked why the clone did not disappear. Cody looked to his troop who was still rubbing his stomach. You alright there, soldier? The said soldier nodded. Yes sir. But I gotta say the kid packs a punch. Cody chuckled as he nodded. I figured as much since you haven't stopped rubbing it since we started making our way. Sorry sir. Obi-Wan stood up straight as he could not see anything different from the shadow clone, as Naruto said it was called in the original. The shadow clone did feel slightly different, but it was almost unnoticeable. I must say that this is a nifty little ability you have. To create a perfect duplicate of yourself must be very handy when sending in a stand-in. Naruto turned back and gave a cheeky smile. Also good when I need to prank someone and get away with it. Anakin laughed at this. Sounds like you are the life of the party back home. Naruto thought about his village and could not help but mentally disagree with Anakin's statement. As he was looking at the group behind him, he finally decided to ask a question that was bugging him for a while. So what is that? He pointed at the white and blue metallic thing that was moving by Ahsoka's side. R2 gave off a few positive beeps as he gave his greeting. Ashoka smiled as she placed a hand on R2's head. This is R2-D2. He's an astro droid. Naruto tilted his head as he parroted the words astro droid. Anakin chuckled as he looked to Ahsoka. Careful Snips, I don't think this planet has learned how to travel through space. Ahsoka was a little surprised to hear this since all the planets she went to that had intelligent life had the capability of interstellar travel. But from what Anakin said and how Naruto seemed to be ignorant of several common things, at least to her, it made the statement make a lot more sense. She couldn't really say primitive because based on his clothing and speech, it was clear that he lived in civilization. Though it would seem that it is just a simple village, so it shouldn't be that big of a civilization. Cody then brought up something that came to his mind when he thought about this planet not knowing about space travel. Sir, should we really bring R2 with us if they are unaware of such things? The group stopped to look at the commanding clone as he continued. If the people here don't know about life beyond their system, seeing an astro droid could cause some problems. Remember when we went to another planet that didn't know about droids? R2 bounded left and right as he beeped in the displeasure of remembering being attacked by the people who thought he was a weapon. Almost lost his lens because of it. Obi-Wan dubbed his beard as he remembered that day. He looked to Anakin as he agreed with Cody's thought perhaps it would be wise not to have R2 with us or this excursion. Anakin nodded I agree. He then looked to the droid R2, head back to the ship and see if you can help get in touch with the council. R2 beeped a few times before turning around and heading back to the ship. Ahsoka then pointed at herself what about I don't exactly look like the rest of you. Naruto began to get the group moving again as he answered meh, they'll just think that you are a girl with paint all over you. Probably because of me since everyone knows that orange is my favorite color. Ahsoka looked at her arm as she tried to sort out how to feel about that statement. The shadow clone looked around before speaking up hey boss, I think we are almost at the front gate. Naruto looked at his clone before nodding gotcha. He then dispelled his clone which surprised Obi-Wan since he was the closest to it and was not expecting it to just disappear. Did you do that? Seeing the nod he chose to start a bit of questioning, might I ask why your shadow clone refers to you as boss? Is that something you ask it to do? Naruto shook his head nah, all clones call me boss because I'm the original. Oh, and did you have to poke it so hard? Obi-Wan was surprised once again how did you? I remember everything that happens to my clones. It's something I just learned it can do. Wish I knew about it before. Could have had it sit through class more. Anakin smiled as he had his own thoughts think of all the boring meetings that I could skip if I knew how to do that. Obi-Wan gave Anakin a reprimanding look Anakin brought his hands up in mock surrender I'm kidding. Mostly. As Obi-Wan began to lecture Anakin on the importance of the meetings, Ahsoka moved to walk beside Naruto. So what's your village like? Naruto looked at her before looking up and thought well. He had a bit of trouble thinking of the right words to describe the village. We have a lot of shops that sell a bunch of stuff like clothes, toys, weapons, and ninja gear. It's called Konoha or village hidden in the leaves. I think we call it that because it has a lot of forests in it. Ahsoka looked around the group and couldn't help but think well the name fits. But she refocused on Naruto when he continued talking. There's also this great ramen stand that sells the best ramen ever. Ahsoka tilted her head what's ramen? Naruto stopped dead in his tracks and stared wide-eyed at the girl. The group all stopped and stared at the boy who seemed to have been frozen. Up in the air, a crow flew by aho aho. One of the clones looked up with a questioning look did that bird just talk? Cody shook his head in disbelief you hearing things soldier. Naruto shook his head as if he got out of a genjutsu you've never heard of ramen before. Ahsoka quirked an eyebrow at his reaction sorry no. Naruto fainted for a second before he pointed towards the direction they were going that's it. After we meet with Tsunade, I'm taking you all to Ichiraku Ramen. To eat the food of the gods. The adults laughed a bit at the boy's antics with Obi-Wan smiling must be delicacy if he is that enthusiastic about it. Anakin nodded as he became intrigued about it, I'm curious about it myself. The group continued their way towards their destination until a large wall came into view. Ahsoka was stunned at it since this was not what she was expecting whoa. She could see a large gate coming up and the inside of the wall. I thought it would be smaller. She had assumed that since it was called a village it would have been smaller. But the size from what she could see, it was about the size of a small city. How is this a village? The group continued to walk past the main gate and were impressed with it. Hey Naruto. Naruto turned his head to see the eternal gate guards waving him over. Obliging he and the newcomers walked over to them hey guys. Hitetsu nodded his greeting to the boy before asking so, Naruto, who are your friends here? He looked the group over and could tell they weren't from around Fire Country. In fact, he had never seen their kind of clothing before, but what he did notice was the ones that looked the same all stood at the ready, as if they were soldiers. And he would bet his whole life savings that they were especially with the. Naruto rubbed the back of his head as he chuckled nervously. Well. They came from outer space. Hitetsu and Izumo quirked an eyebrow at the boy's answer with the latter speaking up. Naruto, did you eat that weird mushroom again while reading manga? Naruto threw his arms in the air as he stomped indignantly that happened only one time, and all I said was that there were flying pink elephants. Ahsoka chuckled as she shook her head good-naturedly. Izumo and Kitetsu looked at the chuckling girl and tried to figure out what was up with her. At first, they thought that she was wearing orange makeup and a headpiece to go with some game Naruto might have up his sleeve, but the texture of the white and blue part looked too much like skin. Many questions entered their mind but kept quiet for now, since the visitor did not seem hostile. Naruto stopped his tantrum as he looked to the guards. They wanted to talk to Granny, so I'm leading them to her. Izumo and Kotetsu looked at each other and nodded before leaning back in their seats. Kotetsu brought out a sign-in book and placed it on the desk. Please sign your name here and check one of the boxes to tell us what you come as. The group complied and signed their names and checkmarked that they were guests in the village and had business with the Hokage, which they knew was the leader since during the trip to the village, Naruto had said several times that the leader of the village was the Hokage. Once they all had signed and they continued on their way towards the Hokage tower. Obi-Wan and Anakin looked around while giving their own little bit of commentary. Obi-Wan smiled at the environment. Quaint. Nice place for a getaway. Anakin nodded in agreement. I agree. Nice little vacation spot. He thought about possibly bringing Padme here when they had some free time and were able to get away from their duties. Cody smiled at the fact that a bunch of kids were playing around the streets. It was something that motivated him in continuing the war. He looked at his soldiers to see that they had similar thoughts. Naruto kept pointing out some of the shops that they passed, but with quick short descriptions of what they sell and some interesting things that he found in there. Ahsoka listened to him as he kept up his small rambling, but she stopped him when she noticed something. Hey, what is that? Everyone stopped and looked at the girl to see her pointing to the rooftops of some buildings in the distance. They all saw some movement going from one roof to another. Naruto put his arms behind his head as he gave a nonchalant answer. Oh, that's just some other ninjas going off somewhere. Maybe to a mission. Anakin put his hands on his hips as he couldn't help but be fascinated by their movements. Is that how you get around? Naruto nodded. When we need to get somewhere fast, yeah. One of the clones gave an impressed whistle as he saw how they were moving. If I could move that fast. Another of the clones shoved him in the shoulder. You would still fall behind everything. Like you want to talk. The clone chuckled at this little banter before they continued on, but they had to once again pause as someone else decided to call out to the boy. Well, Naruto. You sure have an interesting group following you around. Everyone looked to where they heard the voice come from to see a man with silver gravity-defying hair sitting on a branch, leaning against the trunk and a small orange book in his hand. Naruto smiled at the man as he waved. Hey Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi closed his book before he pushed himself into a crouching position on the branch and he gave his usual greeting as he lifted up one hand. Yo. He then jumped down to stand in front of the group. So. Who are your friends, Naruto? His soul eye went over the group but he couldn't help but have his gaze on Ahsoka longer. Everyone else seemed normal, but it was clear that this girl was different. Ahsoka felt unnerved by the single lazy eye that seemed to look at her more than the others, but she kept it to herself since it would be too rude to bring up what she assumed to be a missing eye. Naruto spoke up in response to his sensei's question. They came from outer space and wanted to talk to Granny. Kakashi sweat dropped at how nonchalantly Naruto said something so ridiculous. Okay. Naruto grew a tick mark as he could tell that Kakashi wasn't taking what he said seriously. Hey. Even I think it sounds weird, but I saw them come out of the sky. Kakashi crossed his arms as he eyed the group. You sure you weren't put under a genjutsu? Naruto huffed as he crossed his arms. You already helped me figure out if I am in one, and Pervy Sage taught me how to dispel it. Obi-Wan, being the diplomatic one of the group, stepped forward. I am Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this here is my apprentice, Anakin Skywalker, and his apprentice Ahsoka Tano. Anakin nodded at the silver-haired man with a smile and Ahsoka giving a small wave. Obi-Wan then gestured to the 4 troopers, and this is Commander Cody and his squad. Name's Kane. Ivor. You can call me Pierce. Kakashi looked over the group again before he nodded at them. He looked at Obi-Wan, who was clearly the leader of the newcomers. So what business do you have with our Hokage? Obi-Wan could tell that Kakashi was on guard and would possibly fight them if the answer is unfavorable, but being honest was the best course of action. At first we had come here to retrieve our young friend here. He gestured to Ahsoka, who waved nonchalantly. However, something else had caught our attention and we wished to speak with your leader about this. Kakashi quirked an eyebrow at this, and what would that be? Well, it would be preferable that we speak to your Hokage about this before we tell anyone else. If things don't go our way, then it would be rather useless information. Kakashi didn't like the fact that his question was just avoided, but his eyes locked with Naruto's, and he could see that the boy did not seem wary at all of this group. Sure, the boy was still inexperienced and can be naive at times, but the boy had the best judge of character in the whole village. And he is not joking. Are you sure you can trust them, Naruto? Naruto looked the group over before nodding. Yeah, they seem like good people. So I don't think they are going to do anything bad to Granny. Kakashi sighed as he shook his head. Alright, but make sure you keep an eye on them. Naruto gave his foxy grin and a thumbs up. You got it. Kakashi then looked to the group. Well, as long as you don't cause any trouble then welcome to the Leaf Village. And with that, he shined away. The ones who were not familiar with the move were wide-eyed at the fact that the man disappeared right in front of their eyes without the use of a device that would camouflage them. They were brought out of their impressed and shocked mood when they heard their guide shout out. You better not be late next meeting. They looked at him as if he was crazy, with Ahsoka asking. Would you shout that? Naruto huffed as he turned around and began to walk. Kakashi-sensei always arrives 3 hours late to all his meetings. One of these days I hope he is actually on time. Everyone looked at each other before shrugging and following Naruto. Hokage Tower. Naruto led the group into the tower and nonchalantly walked past the desk lady who was calling out to them, but Naruto told them that it was okay. Obi-Wan crossed his arms as he asked, don't you think we should have spoken with the woman so she could inform your leader that we are here to see her? Naruto waved his hand dismissively. Nah. I do this all the time and Granny never really minds. Anakin chuckled. I'm starting to like this kid. Obi-Wan gave his former apprentice a reprimanding look, only because you were just as much of a troublemaker as he is. Though you at least followed some protocol and rules. The group made it upstairs and were closing in on the Hokage office, but stopped when Naruto lifted his hand. Naruto looked at them as he spoke. Wait here for a minute. Ahsoka put her hands on her hips as she asked why. Just wait here. I'll let you know when you can come in. He walked ahead until he stood in front of a pair of double doors. The group watched the boy as he took a deep breath before he took a step back and jumped into the door, tackling it open and shouting out. Hey Granny. They went wide-eyed as they saw Naruto fly back out of the room and impacted the wall hard, creating a web of cracks to appear. How many times do I have to tell you not to call me that? Vegeta ran up to the boy who was upside down and his feet dangling down. Are you alright? Was Anakin's worried question to the boy that was wedged into the wall upside down. Naruto groaned before opening one eye. Well, you're in luck. She's in a good mood. Obi-Wan was befuddled at this statement. How do you figure? Naruto finally peeled off the wall and fell face first onto the ground. I didn't go through the wall. Ow. After Naruto was able to get back on his feet, which only took a couple of minutes, they entered the office and stood in a line in front of the woman that sat at her desk tapping her finger. Tsunade looked the group over, and despite the stern look she had, she was slightly thankful for this distraction from the paperwork that sat at her left. Shizune stood behind her as she was a little confused at the assortment of interesting people that now stood in the office, but seeing who brought them in, she shouldn't be surprised. Only Naruto would run into some odd people. Tsunade decided to get the spontaneous meeting started. So what can I do for you? Obi-Wan took a step forward and cleared his throat. Well, I'll get right to the point. We would like to request your permission to take young Naruto here with us to be trained to become a Jedi. The room went silent as everyone processed what the man just said until Tsunade, Naruto, and even Ahsoka all said the same thing. What? Flashback? What? Obi-Wan was a little surprised at their reaction, but he had to remind himself that this planet probably didn't know anything about the Jedi or the Force. They seemed to have their own energy source and were privy to that and only that. He cleared his throat to begin his pitch. Allow me to explain. You see, my group, the people we work for, train Force-sensitive children how to harness their abilities so that they would be able to contribute to the galaxy under our teachings. Young Naruto here has the ability to use this power. He levitated one of the books that were on the shelf in the corner and had it float in front of him, as an example. This power allows a person to become one with everything around them and utilize it to do many great deeds. Tsunade glared at the man as she did not like the idea that these people were trying to recruit one of her shinobi. What makes you think I would hand him over to a bunch of people I don't know? Anakin saw that things were going to become worse if the situation wasn't calmed. This is going south fast. This is only an offer. We don't plan on taking him away or anything. What my master is asking you is just for the opportunity to train Naruto how to use the Force. Tsunade shifted her gaze to him. Coming here and immediately offering to teach one of my shinobi in something that I have never heard of before does not give you points. Why shouldn't I order my Anbu to drag you into our T&I department and pull everything out of your head? Obi-Wan held a hand in surrender. Possibly because we came straight to you about this offer. We don't plan on just taking him with us. We only extend the offer to both him and inform you as his superior. Tsunade's gaze went over the newcomers till her eyes landed on Naruto, who was just standing there with a look of shock on his face as he looked at the apparent leaders of this little entourage. Naruto. Naruto snapped out of his shock and looked at his Hokage. Snap out of it, Gaki. This is about you, so you should pay attention to what's happening around you. Naruto shook his head before he scratched the back of it. Sorry. I just wasn't expecting that to be said. I don't know what this Force is, but I saw some of what they could do with it. Though I don't know why they would offer me something when they just met me. Ahsoka walked up to his side and spoke. It's because they sense that you can use it. Obi-Wan wants to teach you how. It's been the way of the Jedi Order to find Force sensitives and teach them. Tsunade narrowed her eyes on the term Jedi Order and felt the need to find out more about them. What is this Jedi Order? Obi-Wan stepped forward as he was the best one to describe how their group worked. As the group listened to the man, Tsunade linked several things about this group to what the samurai do. They sounded like they honor their traditions, but the thing that bugged her the most was that some of their practices seemed to focus on a militaristic way of life. Not that much different from what they do, but to call it peacekeeping is a little off. When Obi-Wan finished his pitch, Tsunade steepled her fingers as she thought about this and what benefits and drawbacks it had. Her eyes shifted to Naruto, who looked interested in it and thought about what would be the best way to go about this. She sighed as she leaned back in her seat. Do you mind if you give us a couple of days to think about this? Anakin and Obi-Wan looked at each other, with the younger one asking. We don't have any meetings or missions at the moment, right? Obi-Wan shook his head. We haven't received any communications about one. And we do have a couple more days to spare before we are expected back. He looked at the woman and nodded. I don't see a problem with that. I will need to send communications to our superiors to discuss about what we are doing, and my young Padawan would be able to find accommodations for us. Tsunade raised her hand. We can handle that. I'll send one of my agents out to find a place and then inform you about where it is. She looked to Naruto as she gave him a specific look that he nodded to. Naruto, why don't you give them a tour of the village while they are here? Naruto smiled before he gestured for the newcomers to follow him. Come on, you like what we have here. Ahsoka, though, was wondering what the small nod he gave the woman was for. She didn't know if the others saw it, but she did. She would have asked, but with how it was between the woman and him, she chose not to pry. Tsunade watched as they left and waited a minute before she leaned back into her seat. What's your opinion of this? Honestly, I think the whole thing sounds like a fantasy book. Coming from the window was Jiraiya as he sat on the windowsill. The way they explained their power makes it sound like a mythical power. To me, it almost sounds like an offshoot of Senjutsu. Tsunade sighed as she wanted to get to the real point. I meant about them taking Naruto off to train in their mythical ways. Jiraiya rubbed his chin and thought as he tried to see how things would go. If what they said was true and they are from beyond our planet, it might be the safest place for Naruto. With the Akatsuki still after him and the other Jinchuriki, there will always be a risk here. If they take him, then there is no way for them to get their hands on him. But if they take him, there is no way for us to make sure he is alright. Jiraiya nodded. That's the biggest downside. I originally planned on taking him out of the village to train till this whole thing came up. How long were you planning on taking him and where? 3 years give or take, and we would be on the move as we do. Tsunade thought about her options, and after a couple of minutes of thinking, she came up with a decision. Then flashback. Naruto was leading the group to a specific location as he promised himself that he was going to show these space travelers the joy of his home. Ahsoka was looking around the village as she took everything in. She then turned to Naruto and asked. So, where are you taking us? Naruto looked at her and smiled. Taking you to my favorite place in the village. Brack smirked at the smile on the kid as he couldn't help but like the village himself. He looked around again and gained a look of confusion. If we win the war, wonder what my brothers and I will do. Maybe I should let them know about this planet and they can come here to vacation a bit. Or maybe they can find a place to stay. Anakin walked up and asked, and what place would that be? He got his answer when the boy pointed to a loud wooden stand that was just up ahead. It was then that they all smelled something in the air. One of the clones asked no one in particular. What is that? Brack smirked as he pointed at the stand that Naruto gestured to just before. That would be our next meal. The group made it to the stand with Naruto calling out. Hey Tucci. AM. We got some poor souls that haven't had the taste of ramen before. The Jedi and clone slightly winced when they heard something drop in the back. They saw a man wearing a chef's uniform come out from a doorway and looked at the group. Tucci eyed them for a minute and called back to AM. We got a group of newbies here. Get ready to show them what we got. Got it? Naruto, Ahsoka, Anakin, Rex, and the clone sat at the stools and looked at the cozy area. Anakin looked at the letters on the menu and figured that they would need someone to recommend what to eat. Hey, Naruto, got recommendations to give. Naruto saw the look of confusion the clones had trying to read the menu and figured out what the issue was. You guys eat meat, right? Everyone turned to him and nodded as they didn't know why he would ask that. Okay, so you can eat all of the stuff on the menu. There was once a woman that came in and said she was a vegetarian. Limits what she would be able to eat. Anyway, I would go for the miso ramen, pork ramen, or all meat. I would go with the miso. Choosing to go with the recommendation, they looked to the man that worked there, only to see him already heading towards the back. We got multiple orders of miso. Set the large pot, we got some customers to please. As they sat and waited for their meal, Anakin chose to start a conversation with their guide. So, Naruto, what do you do for fun around here? Naruto put his hands behind his head as he thought about what he did during his free time before shrugging. Train, I guess. When I'm not doing missions, I find one of my friends in the village to spar against. Ahsoka looked at Naruto with confusion evident in her eyes. You fight your friends? Naruto nodded. How else are we going to get better if we don't fight each other and see where we need to improve? Anakin nodded. Understandable. One of the clones looked at Naruto as he asked. But don't you have instructors to help you out with that? Naruto nodded. Yeah, but sometimes they are out on a mission or doing something else. And even if we go all out, we will always lose. They would wipe the floor with us, so the best ones we can fight against are other genin. Those in our same rank. And the Chunin are just as busy but with more boring duties. Ahsoka tilted her head again. Chunin. Naruto would have looked at her as if she said something dumb, but he realized that she wouldn't have known anything about their ranks. There are a few ranks in our shinobi forces. The lowest rank is a genin. They are the ones that graduated from the academy and do the simplest missions. Plucking weeds, painting fences, chasing a demon cat. Demon cat. Naruto glared at no one in particular as he remembered the cat. Trust me. That thing is evil around here. The Jedi and clones looked up in thought as they each came up with some massive beast that the people here had to deal with. Not knowing it was a small little thing that had learned the art of pissing off the young shinobi of the village. Naruto continued explaining the shinobi ranks, not knowing about the others' thoughts. Chunin is the rank above that. They get to go out on escort missions and take care of bandits outside of the village walls. There is the occasional boring mission like filing through mission scrolls and sitting at the check-in station at the village gates, but it's much better than doing chores for the lazy villagers. Jonin are the high-ranking shinobi who take on assassination or sabotage missions. Brax couldn't help but ask the kid. What rank are you? He asked out of curiosity and general concern. He may be a soldier, but he still thought it was a bit much for a kid to go on such missions. I'm still a genin. Though some of my friends are Chunin since they were promoted to that rank after the Chunin exams. Anakin was curious about this and asked, and what do those entail? Before Naruto could begin to tell them that it was a tournament against each other. They were all greeted with several bowls brought to them by AM. Order up. Everyone looked at their bowls, and they couldn't help but admit that it smelled great. They looked around to find out what they would eat the food with when they heard something snapping and turned to Naruto to see him with 2 sticks in his hand before he took a bite from his bowl. They found their own pair and easily figured out that they had to break them apart. They chose to copy him, but they had some difficulty keeping the noodles on the chopsticks. Anakin raised an eyebrow as his noodles fell back into his bowl and smirked before he brought his free hand up and floated some of it up and took a bite. Master, you shouldn't use the force for something like this. Anakin swallowed before he answered. Easy snips. You're becoming more and more like Obi-Wan. He did it again with some other topping on it and gave a hum of approval. Gotta say, never had something like this before. It's good. One of the clones watched the Jedi do this and grumbled to himself. Damn it, sir. We don't have some magic force to help us out. Brax sighed as his food fell back into the bowl. Beaten by a food dish. Some soldiers. The rest of the group chuckled at this as Ahsoka was growing frustrated at how her master was able to cheat his way into the meal. Obi-Wan's not here. Snips. So why not just do what I do? Ahsoka gave her master a look before she gave up and looked around as if she was about to do something heinous. She lifted her hand and brought up a bite's worth into her mouth. Her eyes widened when the flavor. Wow, this is good. Naruto smiled at the other two. Told you. He looked at Tucci and called out. Hey, can we get a few to go? They have a few friends that need to try this out. The male chef nodded in affirmation. You got it, Naruto. Ahsoka took another bite as she idly thought. Wonder how Master Obi-Wan is doing. Meanwhile. Okay R2, see if you can boost the signal for them. Cody, try and adjust the dish. Yes sir. R2 beeped in confirmation as the satellite was adjusted to have a better signal to send to the ship orbiting the planet before it is sent back to the Jedi Council. They were having a bit of trouble due to the distance from Coruscant, but they were getting somewhere. After a few more adjustments, a small holographic image of Yoda and Mace Windu came up. Master Obi-Wan. Good to hear from you. Though, weak signal you have. Came from the Grandmaster. Obi-Wan nodded. Yes, it is a bit of an inconvenience but nothing major. Mace Windu nodded as he spoke next. Though I am sure that this isn't a social call. What happened? Obi-Wan sighed as he began. Well, young Ahsoka has discovered a planet far out of the reach of the Republic or any organization for that matter. And as we came to retrieve her, we ran across an interesting boy. This caught the attention of the 2 other masters as Mace Windu asked. And what is it about this boy that caught your attention? Obi-Wan paused for a moment for a bit of dramatic pause before he answered. He is immensely powerful in the Force. This was something that the two other masters did not expect to hear. Windu had a feeling he knew where this was going, but he wanted confirmation. And you wish for him to be trained to become a Jedi? Obi-Wan nodded, but he had to clear some things up. Well, I would like to take him on as an apprentice as he is older than the usual Padawans. Around Ahsoka's age. But that is if he is allowed to come with us. And why wouldn't he be allowed to join you? Mace Windu was unsure about what the issue could be. The people of this planet have never heard of the Force before. In fact, they have their own abilities that allow them their own set of skills. And the leader of their village, and his guardian of sorts, is reluctant to allow the boy to join us. I am just informing you about this since he has potential and would like it if he either joined us or remained unseen. We would not want the Sith to catch wind of him. After he finished this statement, he began to explain in fuller detail about this little adventure. The two masters listened intently to what Obi-Wan had to say with Yoda remaining silent the whole time. It was when the man finished that Yoda chose to finally speak. Should he arrive with you, meet with him personally I shall. Clouded the future is now. Unsure if boy is cause. Obi-Wan didn't see it as a problem, but was a little concerned about the fact that the future was clouded. That is only if he is allowed to join us. Mace Windu nodded. Regardless, keep us informed about any new developments, and we look forward to your return. Will do, Master Windu, Master Yoda. With that, the call was ended, and Obi-Wan moved out of the ship with his clone troops. Well, we better get back to them. Don't want Anakin to get into trouble while we aren't around. Yes sir. You think they have a place for us to stay already? Obi-Wan rubbed his beard as he thought about it. Possibly. But their Hokage did say they would inform us. He then turned around and called out. Come along, R2. The people there don't seem like they would harm you unless you do something towards them, so it's safe to say you can come. R2 beeped excitedly as he followed them. Later. Naruto was now on his own as he walked towards his apartment after a pair of Anbu dropped in during the tour and told them that the accommodations were set. Naruto had led them to the inn they would be staying at and told them that since it was nearing the end of the day, he would see them tomorrow. He left them the to-go box for Obi-Wan and his clone troops before he headed home. Naruto smiled as he walked through the door to his apartment and closed the door behind him. But the second the door was locked, his smile turned into a serious frown as he had one last thing to do before he went to bed. He entered his bedroom and activated the security seals on it before he moved to the center of the room and sat in a cross-legged position. Naruto blinked and saw that he was no longer in his room, but in the sewer-like area he was used to. He looked up to see the massive face of the QP looking down on him. What do you think? Sounds like an opportunity to get out of this damn village. Going off onto some other planet to learn about their power. I say go for it. Any excuse to leave Konoha and those stupid villagers. Naruto sighed as he got up and walked towards the large shrine bars that kept the QP at bay. He leaned on one of the pillars and crossed his arms. So, what do you think? Why ask when you already know my answer? Naruto smiled softly as he turned his head towards the QP's side. Just thought I'd ask. Out of the shadows came another Naruto, but this one had solid black sclera and a single colored iris and pupil. If it were me, I would have already said yes. Screw what the old hag says. You know that I won't do that. And you won't either. Yami clicked his tongue as he moved in front of Naruto and leaned on the pillar behind him. Doesn't mean I wouldn't rub it in her face. Naruto sighed at Yami's attitude, but he couldn't blame him. Yami was his dark half. If we go, we don't know how long it will be before we come back. And if we are gone, we won't be there to protect our friends. They can drop dead for all I care. We don't need them in our lives anyway. All they'll do is hurt us when they get the chance. We should just leave and never come back to this shit village. And yet you would hate not seeing if they were alright. Thought so? Naruto smiled at Yami before he looked at Kurama. And you? Kurama propped his head on his paw as he grinned at the two. I already gave you my answer. Naruto nodded. So we all agree. Now let's see if the old hag will even let you go. Naruto smiled as he pushed himself off the pillar. She will. He then faded from the mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes with an excited look. She already knew I would choose this. At the inn. Anakin was looking at his master eating the ramen bowl that they were given with an impressed look. How are you able to use those so easily? Obi-Wan was using the chopsticks as he had always used. Young Padawan, you still have much to learn. One of these days, I'm going to throw that back at you. He smiled good-naturedly as he sat on his bed before looking at R2. So what did you think of the village? R2 bounced back and forth as he gave happy beeps of approval. Yeah, it is a nice place. Hope the kid will come with us when we leave. Obi-Wan finished another bite before he spoke. The Force will guide them to the right choice. But on another note, this ramen is a delicacy. Perhaps we should ask how it is made so we can add it to the cooks on the ship. What, you don't like the rations they give us? I thought you lived off that stuff. Just because I know not to be a picky eater does not mean I don't enjoy a good meal. Whatever you say, master. Naruto, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka were all standing in the Hokage office, with Naruto standing resolutely in front of his Hokage, as he already knew the answer he was going to give her. Tsunade looked over the group and noticed that the clones were not with them. So where are the soldiers? Obi-Wan spoke up for his group on that question. They had returned to our ship as, regardless of the answer you give us, we really must return to the council. Tsunade nodded as she figured that they might be needed back to wherever they came from. So, about the request on whether or not Naruto should go with you. Seeing Obi-Wan and Anakin nod, she shifted her gaze to Naruto. What is your answer, Gaki? The three Jedi were confused as to why the leader of the village would just ask the boy about this, since it is a very big decision. Naruto crossed his arms as he gave a smirk. You should know me well enough to predict the answer I plan on giving. But for formality's sake, I think going with them would be a good idea. With the circumstances surrounding me, it would be better if I am not around for them to happen. Tsunade sighed as she rubbed her temples. I knew that you would say that, and I had already discussed this with the old pervert. She reached down and grabbed a scroll before tossing it to the boy. Naruto caught it with one hand before putting it in his weapon pouch. That scroll holds material for you to keep up with your shinobi training. We know you, and I doubt that whatever they show you will stop you from learning new things from us. And it comes with a warning. Do not overdo it. You have a habit of pushing yourself to the brink, and this is not a good idea when you are going to locations where you will not be able to get any backup from us. Obi-Wan lifted up a hand to get their attention. Excuse me, but I do not believe that he would be able to do much of what you had given him, since he would have much to learn about our order. And potentially, information on how to use many different pieces of technology that our society sees as common knowledge. From their time here, it was clear that the technology level this planet was on, the boy would have no knowledge of such things. Tsunade snorted as she waved her hand dismissively. You won't have to worry about that. Not taking her eyes off the man, she pointed to the boy. He might not be the smartest or the best shinobi in our village. Hey! Naruto cried out indignantly as he heard snickering coming from Ahsoka and could see a smirk on Anakin's face from the corner of his eye. But if there is one thing he is good at, it is surprising people with his ability to learn things and take them into weird ways. If anything, he will learn what you have to teach and you will learn a new way of using it. Naruto smiled at the praise as it was something that went with his title of the most unpredictable ninja. He nodded with a broad smile on his face. Speaking of which. He brought his hand up and flicked the metal headband that signified that he was a Konoha shinobi. Tsunade smirked. What? Did you think I would take that away from you just because you are going to another planet? She chuckled at the thought. That is yours. We all know you will come back someday, but we don't know when that will be. Keep it as a reminder of where you came from. Naruto's smile shrunk into a more serene one. Looking around he asked. So where is the pervert anyway? I sent him to gather the going away party. Under penalty, he would be restrained from going anywhere within a 3-mile radius of a hot spring. Naruto laughed at that. That would do it. He then looked at the three Jedi. So, when are we supposed to go? Anakin smiled at the kid before he put his hands on his hips. Well, we decided that if you were to join us, we would give you a few hours to pack up what you needed and give your goodbyes. Naruto looked at Tsunade with a questioning look. That should be plenty of time for the pervert to get everyone and maybe set up something grand for you. And packing up the stuff you need shouldn't take you more than 30 minutes, so walk around the village and memorize where you came from. Naruto nodded as he walked out of the office with the three Jedi following him. Tsunade leaned back in her chair as she sighed. It is going to be very quiet with him gone. In the hallway, Ahsoka walked up next to him as she asked, why is it that your Hokage asked you what your decision was? I figured that she would be the one to make the choice. Naruto looked at her before he answered. Because out of everyone in the village, I have the final word on what happens to me. The adults may have a say in what I do at times, but at the end of the day, it falls to me. Though I still listen to higher ups since they outrank me. Helps when it comes to missions since I am a soldier. Obi-Wan rubbed his chin. Interesting, do many your age have the same privileges? Naruto shook his head. No. Every other kid my age doesn't get this much freedom. Mostly because they don't have a big furball in their gut and the adults I work for are trying to make up for some past mistake they made. Though they already paid their debts. Anakin tilted his head. Why is that? Naruto looked over his shoulder at him before dropping his smile and gave a dead serious look. Sorry, but that is a village secret that will remain as such. Anakin was surprised to see the mostly cheery kid gain such a look before he held his hands up in surrender. Okay, I won't pry. Just some curiosity on our part. Naruto sighed as he shook his head. Sorry, but it is something I have to deal with. Just let it go. Ahsoka eyed him for a bit before her eyes spotted her master shaking his head. Shrugging, she dropped it, but internally was hoping she would learn about it later on. The group made it to Naruto's apartment complex with the Jedi waiting outside of the building. Anakin looked at his master and asked. So tell me, why are you really wanting to bring him along with us and become his master? This isn't the kind of thing you would do. Obi-Wan sighed as he looked at his pupil. To be honest, I'm not so sure myself. Seeing the inquisitive look on Anakin's and Ahsoka's face, he elaborated. Despite how normally the Jedi bring in those who are connected to the Force, it usually happens when they are younger and far easier, as almost all who we ask know about the Jedi, to begin with. But this planet has never heard of us before and would possibly not know about us for some time. This planet is well beyond any space-traveling civilization, and if it wasn't for your Padawan's mishap, we would never have thought about coming here. He looked at the building and continued. And then the very first denizen of the planet we meet is connected deeply in the Force and for some reason. He almost feels like you. Anakin raised an eyebrow. Me? After a second he grew even more confused at his conclusion. Is this about the Chosen One thing? Shaking his head, Obi-Wan spoke more. Not exactly, he just seems to remind me of you a bit when you were younger, and despite how I could not feel what my master could about you, I have a hunch there is more to him than we can see. Anakin crossed his arms before shrugging. And you wanted to add another potential Chosen One to the team? Maybe we should make a club. Obi-Wan chuckled. Perhaps we might, but this is only a feeling of mine. We already have the Chosen One who is said to bring balance to the Force, maybe this one will bring balance to you. Hey. You guys have the weirdest conversations. The Jedi jumped in shock before spinning around to see Naruto standing a few feet away with a cheeky smirk on his face. Ahsoka's gaze shifted back and forth to him and the apartment he was supposed to be in before asking him. How did you? Anakin nervously chuckled and asked. How long were you there? Naruto shrugged as he said. Between Chosen One thing and hey. I don't think I can be called a Chosen One since I am just one of many shinobi and I have no idea how this Force thing works, but please don't think of me any better than anyone else. I'm still just Naruto. Anakin smiled as he patted Naruto on the head. Don't worry about that. Obi-Wan still treats me the way he did since he began my training. You'll just be another one to add to the list of Jedi. Obi-Wan shook his head before he spoke. Remember that we still have to bring this up with the council. There are some things that need to be brought up with them and they would most likely have their thoughts about this. Master Yoda had told me he would like to meet with Naruto when we arrive. Anakin smiled as he waved his hand dismissively. I'm pretty sure that it will all work out. But for now, we have to get back to the ship. Ahsoka stood next to Naruto and listened to the conversation before she looked at him and asked. Aren't you bringing anything with you? Naruto brought up a scroll and nodded. Yeah, everything I'm bringing is in here. Ahsoka tilted her head and asked. Is it just a list or pictures? Naruto smiled wide. I'll show you later, but for now, we should get going. Obi-Wan nodded. He is right, let us be off. He then turned in the direction he knew the gate they came from was with the others following him. Naruto followed behind, but paused before he looked back at the apartment he had called home for most of his life. Never thought I would feel so attached to the place. It's just a minor sentiment but you should know that it will still be here when you return. Naruto nodded. Yeah, but I have a feeling that it will be a while before that happens. The longer the better. I'm in no hurry to see it again. Well, there it is, look at it. Just move it. Was Yami's reply as he was glad that they would leave this apartment behind, regardless of his lighter half's attachment to it. Naruto chuckled as he turned back to see the Jedi waiting for him. Sorry, just taking one last look. Anakin nodded as he gained a solemn look. I know the feeling. Naruto chose to ignore the look on his face as he figured that it was something he experienced before. He moved to the front of the group and pointed to the right. Come on, we can get to the main gate faster this way. He led the Jedi towards the main gate of the village, leaving his old home for a new adventure. As the group grew closer to the main gate of the village, Naruto could see that all his friends were waiting for him. All the other 10 rookies, their senseis, the Ichiraku duo, the Hokage and Shizune, Jiraiya, Anko, and Iruka. Naruto waved to them as they got closer. Damn, didn't think the perv would get all of you here in time. Jiraiya huffed as he crossed his arms and looked away. Absolutely no faith in your sensei. Naruto deadpanned at him. How many times did I have to drag you away from a brothel in order to get some training done? I lost count. Kakashi chuckled as he patted the sage on the shoulder. You should know by now that Naruto is a diligent student. He would drag you out of bed if it meant he would get more training done. The rookies laughed at this before they began to talk to the blonde. Hiba sapped Naruto in the back. Man, how cool is it that you are going into space? I mean, I didn't believe it at first, in fact, I still don't believe it, but the Hokage said that it was true, so I gotta say, I'm a little jealous about it. Ahsoka crossed her arms as she mumbled to herself. An alien right here that looks different from everyone else and he doesn't believe it. Dibble looked at her and spoke, shocking her. You aren't the weirdest looking person we've seen around. I had to fight a guy that had 2 heads, 2 sets of arms, and could split into 2, trust me, you are not that weird. Anakin looked at Obi-Wan and mouthed out. 2 heads. Obi-Wan could only shrug at it as each planet has its oddities. Shikamaru sighed as he stepped forward. I'm honestly not sure if I should be happy or not that you are going. On one hand, it is going to be quiet with you gone but it won't be as exciting. Ino gave a mock gasp. Shikamaru. Wanting some excitement. Who are you and what did you do with my teammate? Toji chuckled as he stood next to Shikamaru. You know what he means, Ino. Shikamaru sighed as he mumbled. Still have one troublesome blonde here. Naruto chuckled as he patted Shikamaru on the shoulder. You have plenty of excitement here, even if I'm gone. Why did I say something so troublesome? Shino was next. We are going to miss you while you are gone, Naruto. Why? Because it is always difficult to see a friend off when they will be gone for who knows how long. Naruto smiled as he shook his hand. Well, I'll be back at some point. Hinata came up from behind and bowed to him. We all wish you safe travels, wherever you go. And we all look forward to when you return. Despite the simple way she said this, the underlying meaning was clear. Be careful out there. Naruto nodded. Don't worry about me, Hinata. I promise all of you here. I will be back. And you all better be stronger cause just because I am off to another planet, I'm not going to fall behind any of you. Lee pumped his arm into the air. Yosh. Your flames of youth will reach beyond the stars. That's right, Lee. He will show all out there the youth burning inside. Oh, Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Naruto chose to let the two do their thing and turned to the Jedi and tried his best to not laugh at the dumbfounded look on their faces. He snapped his fingers in their faces and they shook their heads to look away from the odd side of the 2 green-clad shinobi. Before you ask, yes, they are like this a lot. Neji sighed as he did his best to quell the headache coming from his sensei and teammate. Denton ignored them and walked up to Naruto. You better keep up your training. You still owe me a sparring match and I am not letting my best friend fall behind. She brought her arm and the two bumped wrists together with a smile. The two had been friends since their time in the orphanage and it was thanks to her that he was decent using weapons. Naruto smirked as they stepped back and spoke. Maybe I'll bring back some space weapons. Denton gained stars in her eyes at the idea of seeing some space weapon. You better. Naruto chuckled. We'll see. He then turned to his teammate. Looks like Team 7 is off to do their own thing. You gotta plan on getting stronger while I'm gone. Sakura nodded as she looked at the Hokage. I think I'm taking up medical jutsu so I can be of some help when you guys come back. But we are gonna need your help to bring Sasuke back. Naruto sighed as he shook his head. We will see how things go when I come back. Just take care of yourself and make sure Kakashi arrives on time to things. You and I know that is a lost cause. The two chuckled at that before they nodded and stepped back. He felt his head shoved down as he heard the cheeky laugh of Anko. Looks like the Gaki is off on a space adventure like those mangas you read. Oh, like you didn't read some of them and wished you could go in my place. Anko let the kid stand and chewed on the stick in her mouth. Nah, the universe couldn't handle me, so better to send you and have them deal with your craziness. Haha, very funny. His deadpan look became a smile as he said. Gonna miss you too, Anko. Anko softly slapped him upside the head. Don't get sappy on me, it isn't like us. The two laughed before Naruto walked to AM and was suddenly brought into a hug. I'm gonna miss you, Naruto. You better take care of yourself out there. Gucci stepped forward and smiled. And make sure you eat well out there. And when you come back, we'll have a steaming hot bowl for you waiting. It was this statement that brought crocodile tears to Naruto's eyes as he realized. I won't be able to eat any ramen till I come back. After the hug lasted a few moments longer, he stepped back and smiled at the two. He then turned to Iruka. Iruka smiled down at Naruto and shifted his gaze to the headband. Never thought I would be so far away from the headband I earned so long ago and passed down to you. You better take care of it while you are gone. Naruto nodded before he hugged the man. Thanks for that, Iruka. Take care of yourself, Naruto. Naruto stepped back after their hug and nodded. He then turned to the Hokage, Shizune, and Jiraiya. Think you can take care of the village while I'm gone? Tsunade rolled her eyes. The village used to run before you were born, I'm sure that it will continue while you're gone. She shook her head as she mumbled out. Though there were a few that didn't want you to leave, but those old fossils can complain all they want, the choice isn't for them to decide. She then stepped up and placed her hands on his shoulders. Don't forget where you came from and we will be here when you come back. Jiraiya looked over her shoulder and spoke. And don't forget your training. We gave you a bunch of things that you should also train in, so we expect you to learn them. I'm not you, pervy sage. The group laughed at the slumped form of the man, while Naruto looked at all of them. As this happened, Obi-Wan looked at the whole group of people that Naruto had. He rubbed his beard and thought about the connections the boy had. This is. Interesting. He had his assumptions on the boy, but this was more than he thought was possible for him. Naruto stepped away from all of them. I'll see you guys when I come back, whenever that will be. With that, he looked at the GD and nodded. Ready? The three nodded as they all left the village gate with Naruto walking behind. He looked behind him and waved at them. Obi-Wan looked at the boy over his shoulder and spoke. I should warn you that it might be a very long time till you see them again. If you are allowed to train to be one of us, you have to accept the way we do things, and the rules of the GD are very strict. Naruto looked at the man and shrugged. In the line of work the shinobi go through, it doesn't matter how hard it is, and if I have to accept what you tell me, then I don't mind doing it. Shinobi are sort of like soldiers to our Hokage, but we can also be seen as mercenaries. Working for who we want depending on the situation. So I'm sure I can handle what you tell me to do. Obi-Wan eyed the boy for a second before nodding. Very well. Naruto looked over his shoulder at the shrinking gates. But that doesn't mean I am abandoning who I am. I am still a shinobi, so let's just see what the GD have to show me. I look forward to it. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.